Hello, and welcome to Bird's Broadcast. Before we get started, let us take a moment to remember Amber, our friend and brave intern number 1, who was sadly turned into kibble for a werewolf. We have, of course, taken great care in performing our burial rites of screaming at the moon while throwing glitter onto the deceased. May she rest in pieces. But the good news, let me introduce you to intern number 2. Come say hi, Wilbur.
Wait, I'm number 2? What happened to the first one?
Moving on. We at the studio have decided to keep them out of harm's way and we'll be having Wilbur take on a new segment, The Weather. I mean, how could that possibly go wrong? But we have delayed enough, so without further ado, please gather around your speakers and allow me to present to you the conclusion of The Pimples on My Boyfriend's Back, written by Wearing Human Skin, and the second story for tonight, Clocks, written by Leather Isopod6474. As always, the links are in the description below. Do please like and subscribe. I woke up, tied down onto a bed. At first I strained to gradually lift my eyelids in a grueling effort to wake up. In my sleepy days, I was still able to sense how my head laid on some soft, cushioned surface. My body felt warm and cozy for some reason. I felt comfortable until I tried to move my body but realized I couldn't. There was some cold material snaking around my arms and back, digging into them and preventing me from getting up. They were probably chains James had devised to restrain me. At best, my neck wasn't tied down, so I was able to mobilize it, and crane my head upwards from its face-down position to survey my surroundings. My vision was still slightly blurry and fuzzy, though it was clearing as my awareness sharpened. At the very least, I could somewhat make out a few details in my immediate vicinity. Like the surface I laid on, there was a bed, and at the head of it was a red, furry pillow. As I looked behind me, I discovered the reasons why I felt so warm and cozy was because I had some thick blankets wrapped around me. There was a sense of familiarity to this bed, and I soon realized it was the bed that James and I used to sleep in back when we were together in his apartment. I briefly wondered whether I was in fact in his apartment, but as I inspected the area beyond the bed, I realized it was not the case at all. The room I was in was truly expansive, stretching out as far as I could see around me. A few sections were harshly lit with white fluorescent lights. Most sections were unlit, blotted in darkness. Luckily, my own section was lit. From what I could tell, the entire area appeared mostly empty, save for a few materials haphazardly strewn around, like ropes, wooden crates, metal shards, corrugated iron sheets. The walls and floor were made of dull gray concrete, which was cracking and buckling in some places. A thick layer of dust has settled over the floor, signaling to me that I'm in a place that has not been well cleaned or maintained. From all these clues, I figured out that I might be in some abandoned factory or warehouse. I noticed that the place was devoid of windows. This meant I couldn't even look out of the place to have some sort of idea where this building was situated. James had likely chosen this secret location on purpose. There were no doors either, but I did see at a far corner, on the front side furthest from the bed, there were some stairs which led upwards onto a small balcony leading to a single door painted blue. That's it. That's all my neck allowed me to see after straining it in different directions. I had no other clues from where I was. Soon, my single source of answers had arrived because I heard the blue door creak open and footsteps walked across the balcony and down the stairs. I knew who it was before I even saw their face, as a tiny figure in the distance grew as they approached, and their features became more apparent to me. James wore a baggy pair of blue jeans but remained shirtless. I figured it was likely because he didn't need a coat anymore to hide them. I noticed how thin he's gotten, his ribs poked out through his chest, and his arms were skeletal and bony. He was so paper thin it looked like he hadn't eaten in weeks. He stopped a few meters from the bed and smirked at me. "Hey, Katie," he said softly, still wearing that grating smile. I kept my face stony and devoid of emotion except for the slight rage that peeked through. "Katie, I promise I'm not going to hurt you." "You fucking kidnapped me, you psycho!" I snapped, my voice sharp and seething with hatred. And now you have me tied down? You honestly want me to believe you won't hurt me? Look, I know you're mad, but I'll explain everything soon, he said as he inched closer to plop next to me on the bed. He moved his hands to stroke me on the cheek, softly whispering his next words. But before I do, I want you to meet my new family. He stood up, placed his fingers over his mouth to whistle loudly. I instantly heard the sound of what sounded like a million scuttling footsteps approaching us. I realized he was calling them, and like well-trained dogs they came running. I turned my neck in different directions to look, but they weren't there. I realized that they were crawling from the ceiling, again. As much as I strained my neck, it was hard to angle it in such a way that I could spot the creatures. James saw me struggling and helped prop me up by the chin with his hand. I could finally see the ceiling. There were dozens of them, and they had emerged from dark recesses of the ceiling that flood above us. I'd already partially seen how they looked previously in my bedroom, but this time I was aided by the bright lights to see their appearance in painful detail. Their oval bodies were covered in an outer, glossy casing like an exoskeleton that shimmered silver. They had slightly segmented bodies, like a millipede. Their multitude of furry, dark red legs radiated out from their bodies. I counted and discovered that each one had 12. Worst of all was their eyes that dotted the segment of their body that belonged to their head. 5 of them. Each glowed like a golden emerald, watching me unblinkingly. Do you see how intently they're watching you? They love seeing their new mom, James whispered, though I tried my best to ignore his voice. One thing I noticed too was the cacophony of sounds they made. It sounded like a chorus of chattering and clicking noises that they might have emanated from their mouths, like they were talking with each other. James then snapped the fingers of his free hand that wasn't holding me up, and made 3 clicking sounds with them that echoed up towards the horde of creatures at the ceiling. It seemed like he was signaling for them, because one of the creatures detached from the ceiling and dropped down. I thought it would hurtle to the floor, but I was surprised as it unsheathed wings that kept hidden within the folds of its body. It fluttered gracefully to the floor to land next to James. I noted it reached James' knee in terms of height. This one's name's Daphne, James said as he motions toward the monstrosity that stood next to him. I nearly giggled at the fact that he actually gave this disgusting thing a name, but I was too dazed and shocked at the sight to laugh. James let go of my chin, seeing how I didn't need to stare at the ceiling anymore. I watched as he moved his hand to stroke and caress the creature on its underbelly. He scratched it lovingly like one would do to a dog's belly. The worst part is I could hear the creature purr in pleasure like a cat would. Daphne's pregnant, you know, James spoke as he continued to caress her underbelly, and she's just looking for a new place to plant her new eggs. What? Was the only word I could mouth as I fumbled to understand what he was saying. I would let her use my body again, but unfortunately I feel drained from the last batch. He continued to ramble on. James, I muttered in a low, dangerous voice. What the hell are you talking about? Well, in simple terms, the babies complete a part of their life cycle in a human host. Think of it like being a second mom to these babies, Katie. I saw the creature, Daphne, lift its wings and whiz into the air before hovering above me and landing on my back. I felt its furry legs brush against my skin. No. James, no! Please stop! I struggled hopelessly against the restraints as I continued to plead with James to let me go. My mouth was agape and I heaved for breath in a flurry of panic. I felt it crouch low onto my back and deposit the eggs onto multiple spots on my back. I don't know how long the ordeal lasted for. It could have been a few minutes, maybe an hour. Then the creature opened its wings and flapped away again. I was done with my body. James approached me and I felt him plant a greasy kiss on my cheek. My eyes were shut as tears flowed through them, and I shook helplessly in my spot, lacking the strength to even turn my cheek away. That wasn't so bad, was it? He asked rhetorically, knowing I couldn't answer in my state. His last words unsettled me with their ominous meaning. Don't worry, you'll grow attached to them, just like how I did. The first half of the month was pure torture. James force-fed me while I laid face down on the bed in my chains. He tried to make conversation with me, but he'd be met with my silence. I want to say the worst part was feeling the eggs on my back, but weirdly enough, they didn't hurt like I expected them to. Sure, I was getting a bit thinner as I felt the eggs grow, but I didn't feel pain or anything. And I know it sounds twisted for me to admit, but it kind of felt fascinating. To feel the life of the eggs grow on my back? I could eventually feel them wriggle and move about my skin, but honestly, it just tickled. And at times I giggled from the sensation. Eventually their birth occurred 3 weeks later. When they hatched, I tried acting disgusted when I saw the larva crawl out from my back, but I didn't. I simply felt a strange feeling of accomplishment surge through me, knowing I played a huge role in creating and nurturing these creatures to life. Like a mother, they might look ugly on the outside, but they are sweethearts once you get to know them. Over time, I accustomed myself to stroking and petting them. The way they purred in response was cute. I grew to understand their clicks and calls, how to whistle for them to come to me. Eventually, James even let me out of my chains and monitored me while I played with them, making sure I wouldn't run away. I wouldn't do such an absurd thing anyways. I'd never abandon my babies. It's cheesy to say this, but I think James was right when he said I'd grow attached to them. James recently spoke to me, and he said he wants us to be a happy family, and we can't keep hiding ourselves in this abandoned building if we should prosper. I agree. We're currently making plans one day to emerge and make the world accept us and our children. Well, dear listeners, I cannot say I saw that incoming. I don't know about you, but I, for one, could feel the little babies crawl under my skin and give me small little love bites while feeding. Let us leave that thought to ferment and grow within your imagination for now, though, as it is now time for our sponsor, Rulex, and their new watch, the Rulex Screech.
You wake up to the beeping of your alarm clock, hit snooze, and fall back asleep, only to wake up with 5 minutes to dress and rush out the door. Does this scenario sound familiar? Are you always hitting the snooze button? Perhaps just sitting on the edge of your bed, thinking, I wish I had an effective way to wake up. Well, wish no more, for we have the answers you are seeking. Allow us to present to you the Rulex Screech, a brand new line of Banshee alarm clocks. Right about now, you might be asking yourself how to get your very own. Well, my dear sleepy-eyed friend, wonder no more. It's as easy as reaching out to one of our specialists. They will do an assessment, and we will take the Banshee straight out of Irish mythology and deliver her straight to your door. So give us a call and ask for the new Rulex Screech. We are not responsible for bursted eardrums or death caused by the Banshee wail.
My goodness, now that is a fantastic product. I even know a few students who could use an early morning wake up like that to help them be on time for class. This will make a great present for them. But now it is time for our next story, Clocks, written by Leather Isopod6474. My father had a burning love for clocks. Every wall was brushed with little clocks he built himself. Yet, there was nothing compared to our beautiful big grandfather clock. It stood 20 feet tall in the center of the living room. Its light shone from the face almost like a full moon on a starry night. It had a beautiful chime as well, a melody that would be felt in your heart like no other. But what surprised me the most was how long it took to be built for its quality. He began building it a month before I was born. He finished it a month after. I always thought that he must have been an incredible, talented man. Despite the beauty of the clock, from its decorative carvings along the wood to its beautiful chime, at times it gave me an eerie feeling, like something was watching me. The weirdest part was that I never heard a single tick from it, yet it was fully functional. I asked my father about it, but he always brushed it off. It's been a year since he died from unknown causes now, and I'm keeping the house as pretty as it can be. My father told me never to enter the third room on the second floor. But now that he's gone, there's nothing stopping me. I carefully turned the handle and peeked in the room, which smelt of pine and metal. It looked like an average messy woodshop. Lumber planks scattered around the desk with mismatched tools laying around. It took me a moment to notice there was not a single clock in the room, but I brushed it off. Going to sleep, pleased to know that my father was not hiding much from me, I fell asleep peacefully for the first time after my father's death. It took a month for everything to go downhill. I began feeling uneasy as if I was being watched, especially from the workshop. I decided to rummage through it to at least clean it up. I found a note that read, "My dear son, I knew that you would look through here due to your curious nature. I'm leaving this note because my time is almost up. The pact agreement is almost over and my soul is no longer mine. I want the best for you, so listen up. You never had a mother, and I told you that she died while giving birth to you. That was not true. I killed her a day after. I deeply regretted doing so and locked her soul in the clock that I was building. Immediately after, it had a unique, glowy aura to it. It was stunning. I became obsessed with it and began killing off multiple people a day, only to trap them as well. The end result, a month later, satisfied me deeply, but I still worried about being caught. That's when I met them. They, who had no name, offered me a deal. I could kill anyone or anything without a trace for the price of my soul. I was hesitant, but I agreed, thinking of all the clocks I could build. So stupidly, I shook their hand, confirming the pact agreement. Anyways, I was recently informed that the souls would be vengeful towards me, and since my time is nearly up, I fear they are after you. So here's what you must do to preserve your life. Step 1. If you hear ticking from any of the clocks no matter what, do not move. They are listening. If the clock chime even slightly seems off, run for your life. They have found you. And the most important rule, don't try to. The letter is torn off from there. Panicking, I jumped on the floor and began searching for the other paper in the room. That's when I noticed ashes. Ashes scattered across the floor. Since then, I lived my life fearing that I'll do something wrong. When the clock started ticking every now and then, I was terrified. And it just happened that this last time I panicked. My heart felt as if it was going to burst out of my chest. Just then, the clock began its melody. Deformed tunes filled the atmosphere, with cracks as the bells rung. As soon as the tune stopped, something let out a blood-curdling scream. I ran faster than you could imagine. That's where I saw it. A slender creature with its bones sticking out. Skin was pale and unhealthy. Long, brown, and split hair, and popping eyes. I wore a dress that was most likely once beautiful. Studying it for less than a millisecond, I realized it was my mother. It kept forward in my direction, making no sound but the creaks of her joints as she moved. I ran outside as quickly as I possibly could, breathing so heavy I bet you could hear me from a mile away. I hopped in the car and tried to start the engine. Click, click, click. The car didn't start. As soon as I noticed, it was too late. My once mother had already killed me. The other half of the note read, "Do not panic. They can hear everything to the beat of your heart. Love, your father."
(10/28/1943)